Kogeman, were you going to read some of the paragraph or something?
Yes, Jim.
So
Great.
we are live now.
Welcome everyone to Where Rivers Meet, Spirituality Center. We're so very pleased to have you with us this evening. We have with us our close friend, Jim Rock, who in the material, the message that I sent earlier today, you know as an astronomer, extremely knowledgeable in terms of the native indigenous astronomy and indeed the star systems in many of the indigenous peoples around the world. So Jim has done much scholarship in this area. And in the bio that I sent out to you, you know that he is the director of a program at a University Minnesota Duluth, in which he directs the indigenous programming for the planetarium and physics and astronomy department. And also he works with honor students in the area of native sky walkers, indigenous archaeoastronomy. Jim has also, just a few years back, he had an experiment that went up on one of the rocket ships to study seed life. And Jim is also very active in many areas in regard to the revitalization of native traditions. Even close by, in regard to working with Waziatawin and others, to Jim could say a little bit about that perhaps, to recreate a native community there, which will have lodges and people who will be able to live there in a traditional way. He also has worked with our Micronesian population in nearby Milan to work on indigenous navigation systems. And so he and a friend of mine, and also a friend of Jim's, a professor at the university, have been instrumental in recreating some of the canoes, creating those canoes with the help of indigenous Micronesian folks who have had that tradition and have then worked with the Lower Sioux Reservation, Dakota community, and others, and maybe communities even outside of this area, to bring back some of those traditional ways of navigating. So Jim, well, I am so happy that you're with us this evening. Jim has so many lives, very deep in spirituality, very deep in the knowledge of indigenous traditions. So Jim, so very happy to have you with us.
Hamitaka yapi. Chantawashtea na hana pechi yusapido. Good evening, my relatives. Pastor Kogeman, I'm just so humbled by your kind introduction, beautiful words, and I miss you very much. We used to see each other very often, and I'm so glad that, you know, this technology has its pluses and minuses, but to be able to be in our Zoom presence together and meet some of the folks you've been working with and sharing your many gifts with, it's wonderful. So I should greet you traditionally. I started to in Dakota, the way my dad taught me. Kogeman knew my dad too, and he's gone back to the stars and the Earth. Made his journey about 10 years ago, a little over now, and so he would say this: "Ha mitakiapi, chantea washtea nahana pechi yusapido, ocheti shakoing oyate himataha, imanija ska imachage." He wouldn't say that last little piece, but I said, "Hello, my relatives. I greet you from a glad heart and offer you my hand." And then I said that I am of the 7 Starfire nations. He would say that. And that's kind of the picture behind me. Our logo, 7 teepees, represents 7 stars. The fire in those teepees are the starfires above. And then I said that I was also born at Iminija Ska. Now, he was born up at Sisseton. So he was more north of you, whereas I was born in what is now known as St. Paul, the place where the water comes out of the little rocks. And but the 7 Ocheti Shakoing Oyate, 3 words: Ocheti Shakoing Oyate. Shakoing is the middle word and it means 7. So we are the 7 Starfire nations. And that's the 4 Dakotas, the 2 Nakota with the N, and the Lakota with the L. And before we were DNL, we were one people living where the waters meet, where the rivers come together, as your program series name. And we call that Bedote. Bedote is where the Minnesota Wakpa and the Hahawakpa, the Minnesota River and the long river of the waterfalls, join in what is now the Twin Cities. So I have some slides prepared and a couple of little links. We'll see if they work. And it's kind of in 3 parts, so we can pause and see how it's going, take some questions. We're a small enough group here. And yeah, I guess I'll share screen and find it. Here it is. This one. There we go. So do you have a thumbs up? You're seeing the screen and good, good. Wash day. All right. And wash day means good. All right. So yes, I'm on the governing council for Makoche Ikikchupi, and we'll tell you a little about that. But first, because I am an astronomer, I'm not trying to recruit you for NASA or anything, but you never know. So indigenous astronomers, you know, we've always been here. We didn't wear spacesuits like this. And that's kind of an interesting picture, but let me put this up there and say, I'm going to do something of this talk for my physics and astronomy department, other professors up there. And I put this on there: there is no space for inequity, arrogance, bigotry, or ethnocentrism. You know, we start out with kind of egocentrism. We can't help it when we're babies. It's all about us, you know, and whether we're hungry or messy. And then, you know, we learn about our culture. And sometimes we get stuck in our one culture. Then we kind of realize we're not the only culture, and there's others. And so if we get stuck at the ethnocentrism, then we never really get to the geocentrism, which says the Earth is the center of the universe. But then hopefully, you know, 400 years ago or so, we got beyond that a little and realized that maybe the sun is the center. That maybe we go around the sun instead of the sun around us. So that's heliocentrism. And then about 100 years ago, we realized, hey, those aren't all stars. Some of those light spots with a bigger telescope are actually entire collections of stars in that beautiful spiral shape, those galaxies. So it kind of looked like all these other galaxies were moving away from us. Like maybe we're the center galaxy. And then we found one that was coming toward us. But so then we don't want to be galactocentric either. So there's one universe. Well, that's what they used to think until some mathematics came along and made us really wonder. We don't have proof to this yet, but what if there's more than one universe? And what if they're all sort of mathematically folded together somehow? Who knows? So then there's universocentrism instead of a multiverse. Who knows? And so that opens up all kinds of interesting questions, more for philosophy than physics. At a previous university, I was teaching American Indian philosophy and American Indian spirituality and philosophical thought. And so I was able to bring in our indigenous cosmologies. You know, there's so many different nations of us, and we have different stories. We have some beliefs in common and some different beliefs, of course, because that's how we are as humans. But the next little sign on here is so you recognize my dad. I wouldn't be here talking about any of this without him. His name was Tabadoka Sapa, Itokab Nashin Shni. It means stand not in front of black buffalo. Talk like Yoda we do. And, you know, they've got those horns, so that's good advice. Don't stand in front of the black buffalo. You know, he was born in just barely into 1930s, and it was a hard world for him. He grew up not speaking English until he was 12 years old, but he had a wonderful world, and he was probably better for not speaking English. His grandmother mentored him, and she lived to be 8 days short of 100. She was a leaf woman, an herbalist, Wachpe. And so up until 12, he helped her gather the medicines and the foods. She was a midwife. She probably would have had at least 1 or 2 PhDs, maybe 3, because she understood the inner relationship between how the stars change and the plants and how we live seasonally and so forth. So it's pretty fascinating that so much of that worldview that he had to change because he went to boarding school, and that was mandatory. They took our kids from their settings, and they really tried to knock the culture out of us, tell us to stop speaking our language. They rubbed his skin with bleach and said, "You're too dark. You know." I mean, incredible stuff. And he was expected to punish the younger students if they were speaking in Dakota. Of course, he wouldn't do that, so then they punished him more. It's a whole system to stop us from being who we are. And that's a painful part of our history, but I'm not going to focus on that tonight, but I do want to share what it is to come home and to be able to know this is our home and to speak our languages in our home. And so, you know, we're the buffalo people. Not all Indians had teepees or hunted buffalo and based our life on that, but we did. So he's got a shell and he's burning this plant from the prairies that grows out by you too, the pejihota, the sage. It gives a really good fragrance, and it reminds us that the air we breathe has been breathed by many relatives all around us and before us and after us. And it's not just about us with 2 legs, but those with the green rooted ones and the 4-leggeds, the wingeds, the crawling and swimming and so forth. So there we go. And because my dad's name is Don't Stand in Front of the Black Buffalo, these are modern buffalo, but long ago, oh yeah, this one here, we hunted for buffalo, right? Once we hunted for buffalo. Now we hunt for knowledge, which can grow up into true wisdom. So those arrows on the astronaut's back, you know, the arrows have feathers which help it fly through air, but there's no air in space. So what might seem kind of like we're backwards, no, I'm saying that those old values of what that arrow represented, owotagna, to be truthful and straight, upright, to carry those values of wisdom and generosity, love, you know, sacrifice. Anyway, there's a better picture of us, and so I'm just saying thank you, Ate. Ate is our word for dad. And notice that about 12,000 years ago, the bison were way bigger. So if you were going to have buffalo for dinner, fast food, you had to be faster than your food. So you'd probably need a lot of friends and maybe more than arrows. And look how the buffalo covered what we call North America today. We call Turtle Island. Turtle Island is Florida is one leg of the turtle. And Baja California down by Mexico there, that's the other turtle leg. So we're in a good place on the top center of Turtle Island. But all those buffalo, 60 million, by the time of my great-grandparents' birth, the same year as Einstein was born and the light bulb was born, the 60 million were down to about 300. And then the railroad came through and split that herd in two parts. And again, our way of life was based on the buffalo. So they knew if you could get rid of the buffalo, you'll get rid of those. Yeah. So anyway, the buffalo eaters. So home is where our story begins. And so I have a little video clip here. Maybe I need to jump out of this for a minute and start it. And then I'll stop share and come back so I can get it playing. I know sometimes it works when you go right to it. Other times it doesn't want to. So, all right, let's see if that comes up. No, I'm going to do a cut and paste here. It's not like, okay. This is just a little video that'll tell you better than my words will. So let's hear, let's find a share screen again. Sorry.
I don't know if there's supposed to be sound, but I haven't heard anything yet.
Oh, sorry. The audio's not coming, huh?
In the share screen, when you click share screen at the bottom, there may be a share
volume
sound.
control, huh?
Yeah, share
Yeah,
sound.
usually I haven't had to do that, but let's see. Oh, I'm glad you jumped in there. Sorry. I've got, says you are screen sharing.
I would end the screen share and start over. And then when
Okay.
you click share screen, click the screen you want to share. And at the bottom, there's share sound and optimize your video clip. You can click.
All right. Let's go to. You were getting the visual though. That's good.
Yes.
That's because you're Montevideo and not necessarily Monte Audio. Sorry. There. And I'm looking for the share button went away. I've got too many things open, but oh, I do this every day, like 3 or 4 times, but I don't know. There's always once each day. Okay, there. Share screen and pull it up again and
You
look
see
for an
boxes at the bottom.
Let's see, it's hidden at the bottom. Let me pull that up. Come from the star. Share is just that's if you wanted to send it out. I don't see an audio, not on the website or on the, the Zoom. It just says stop share. Let's try it again just to see if you're getting audio with it. I'll hit play. I'm hearing the audio, but
I'm not hearing anything.
Me neither.
okay. Sorry, there's some music on it, and okay. I think we don't. What I'm going to do is just pull it back to where we were, and you know, you already heard this part, but now you're seeing it in my language and hearing it with the language. And so in that cave where I was born, there are drawings that tell of our cosmic origin story. And so that's downtown St. Paul. And here is our Dakota star map, or part of it. And there's a buffalo there. You can see the buffalo constellation. Now, the brightest star in the sky is the buffalo's tail. So the buffalo's head is up by the Pleiades. And then the buffalo's backbone are the three stars of what you would know as Orion. Orion's belt are the buffalo's three backbone, where the hump of the buffalo is. And so the two stars above Orion belt and the two below Orion belt are ribs, two ribs above, two ribs below. But really, if you're looking down on top of the buffalo, they're kind of protecting the heart of the buffalo, which is in there too. So that's just a quick version of why we're buffalo people. And we say we come from the stars, or we come from a cave, the cave I just showed you, or we've always been here. And what I realized, what those elders were telling me, is those are the three poles of a teepee, that they're all three connected. So do we come from a star or a cave, or we've always been here like buffalo? And the answer is yes. And I call that starchitecture. That's the starchitectural foundation of who we are. We have constellation identification. And so let's let this play just a little bit, and then I'll pause it. And
Jim, how old is this knowledge?
oh man, I could tell you it's, oh, you know, I'll be conservative because we're recording it. And I'll tell you, you know, at least 1,000 or 2,000. But to be honest, the snow's not on the ground. It's not wintertime, but I can tell you we have a constellation in the top of the sky there where it is the true heart of the sky. The North Star, Polaris, has only been the North Star that all the rest dance around for about the last 2,000 years. If you go back 5,000 years ago, when the pyramids of Egypt were being built, it was this the Thunderbird's wingtip. And if you go back to about the time the glaciers were here, 12, 13,000 years ago, it was another star, the one known as Vega. So Polaris, Thuban, and Vega, but that's only 13,000 years. You need to double that time, 26,000 years. And it makes a perfect circle that perfectly encloses. Can you see my background still? I can change my background to what is really, well, I'll do that in a minute. So yeah, it's at least several thousand years old, and it might be so far many thousand years back that Western academics really don't want to believe it, but I'm publishing about that, and I'm giving the evidence, the mathematical and linguistic, all the other evidence. So now you see this is like a dancer here, where when we look at those stars, it's almost like the ancestors dancing. And we say we come from the stars, and to the stars we return. Because when you think about it, that's what stars do. They make atoms, and they blow those atoms out like stardust or the ash of stars. And so I'll just, there we go. The iron in our blood, the carbon in our body came from a sun before this sun. Our sun now is yellow, which means it's hydrogen becoming helium, the first two simplest elements on the periodic table in chemistry. But if you have iron, that's down in the middle on the periodic table in your blood. Where'd that come from? Stars have to turn big and red before the helium turns into carbon, and the carbon into nitrogen, oxygen, and so forth. And when they get to iron, they stop. But there's elements bigger than iron. So what happens there? Well, that stardust gets recycled and a new star is born. It's kind of like dust bunnies in the sky, you know? So the atoms in our body are so old, and yet our Dakota philosophy says we do come from the stars, and they mean it. And then they didn't tell me all this right away at 5 years old or 14 or 20. You know, I was 30 or 40 before I started hearing exactly which stars. And they wanted to see if I was in it for the long haul, if my language was progressing, if I was, you know, keeping the values. And so basically, there's protocol. There's knowledge I can share and knowledge I can't if it's not the right time of year or if we're recording and so forth. So I'm going to let this go and just, it's almost over here. We're recycled stardust. The Milky Way is like a river. It's a mirror of the Mississippi. So what I'm saying is those burial mounds in St. Paul at a place called Indian Mounds Park, we think of that, at least the Western people think of it as a place of death. But for us, you don't have death without birth. It goes in a circle. So it's the place where we were born. That cave is like a birthplace. But the burial mounds above, I realized that's a pregnant mother belly. The earth is like our mother. And so that's like a 9-month pregnancy, almost a year. And then I started to look at, well, how many mounds? And there's a number pattern there. And that's kind of the beadwork I'm holding here. Sun and moon and how many numbers. So all of this has taken me, you know, any 15 or 20-year-old can do it with 40 or 50 years experience. 4, 5, 6 decades. So the cottonwood tree is right there by that Indian Mounds Park. And we say that that tree is like a bridge between the wet river below, and the cottonwood tree loves its roots wet, and then the stars in the Milky Way above. The Milky Way is like a river of lights, and the river is a river of stars where they're reflecting lights on the water. Well, the tree, in the little twig of the tree, there's a little 5-pointed star. So the cottonwood tree is full of stars. So do you see it's full of water and stars, like the Milky Way and the river? So that's our most special tree. So where these mounds were and how many, everything is planned. It's not random. And here's our philosophy of Capemini. You know, Billy Mills, the 1964 Olympic gold medalist in the 10,000 meter in Tokyo. I've gotten to be around him a few times. I taught his niece, and anyway, he says we are spiritual beings living a material or physical existence for a while. And that's very much our philosophy, that there's an above and a below, and they're mirrors. And so that's why the cave down by the river matches a star up by the Milky Way. So that's our Capemini. It looks like 2 flat triangles. They're not flat, and they're not just triangles. Those are teepee poles that make a circle above and a circle below. You can see that we've had many thousands of years to think about this, and you won't get it in 20 minutes, but you know, you will start to. The road of spirits, or babies coming into birth, and the elders going home. So we need to be living by our values in a good way. So, you know, so the babies stay here and the elders have a good going home. All right, so I'll stop that share. And maybe I could pause again and I see we've got a couple more folks. Any comments or questions? Sorry that the audio didn't work in Montevideo.
Welcome to those of you who are joining us. Observations.
Or chat. You can put, I'll check the chat here too.
Looking at our history, it's so tragic about the boarding schools and what they tried to do. And I'm so grateful they didn't succeed, that you have retained the knowledge and the language and have so much to share with us.
Thank you. That's really a testament to my dad. As I say, Pastor Kogeman knew my father and knew that he was a very rare, beautiful person of integrity. He really walked the talk.
A very loving man.
Yeah.
Very kind and loving.
I had the best role model, you know, and he was self-effacing. He had great humor. He said, you know, my teacher said I should look at the stars and astronomy, you know, and the teacher said that to him, and he said, really? And the teacher said, yeah, you're good at taking up space. He had a lot of one-liners, and it was a way of keeping us humble, you know, that I love school. Now, my mom was German. So I didn't get his dark skin, but I got the nose. And it was he didn't even have the electricity until probably after he went to boarding school. And then he served in the Korea War, and he was wounded there, and he recuperated in Japan. I mean, he was pretty severely, he probably wouldn't have survived. I won't go into those details. I just learned from another 90-year-old veteran more about what happened. But then he received orders while he was recuperating to be at the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. And she was only 5 years older than he was. And so here she still is, you know, 95 years old, coming up on her, well, the birthday here. So here's this young 20-year-old or 21-year-old at the largest televised world event in history up to that time. It was the first world event televised. I mean, and the medicine man in the sweat lodge told him what he was going to experience before he went away. And he told me some of those details, and he didn't, you know, until it happened, then he remembered. So these gifts of, again, in the, you know, you're a church group, so you understand, we're open to ways of seeing and knowing that science cannot explain. I love science, but I know that's my European side, and I have other sides. And I also have a spiritual side to my European side too. So that's why my dad, and in fact, his best friend and his best friend's dad, that was Vine Deloria Jr. and Vine Deloria Sr. Vine Deloria Sr. had just been ordained, and when he came back to the reservation, he baptized my dad. So it was probably sometime in that first 12-year period, and he mentored my dad. He loved athletics and you know, sports as well as spirituality. And so yeah, thank you, Vicki. They had I think it was a wonderful time where they could be, you know, the church kept a strong watch on them, but my dad and Vine Deloria, they were able to preach in Dakota and sing drum songs. And then it got worse after that. You know, there was a loss of trust. But I think for a while, they believed that our theologies had enough in common. But then, you know, 1862, 1863 was such a tough time for my dad's family. I'll get to that in the slideshow here, so I better get back to that. But any more comments or reactions?
Just appreciate you telling us how you share some things in different situations, you know, and some things can be recorded. And I mean, that's such a mystery to me. So it's just interesting to hear that there are like these sacred rituals or situations where you can share information or not.
Yeah, thank you.
So
Yeah,
thank you.
you know, Western science, we sort of say it's open to everyone. And I'm always spending my time saying, you know, especially to women, you know, you're natural scientists as well, and math, and it's um, we at the university, you know, we want to recruit students of all backgrounds, and you know, it's just there's a lot of those issues today that are changing as well. So we're not trying to hold anything back, but it's our most sacred knowledge. It's who we are, and it's the last part of us, if we still have that.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it. I do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure. Okay, so I'll go back to sharing these slides, because I think the pictures do a lot more than what I can do with words. All right, just let's see. Here it is. Full screen. Okay, so home is where our heart is. I'm sure you can all picture a place where your heart is. Maybe a place where your certain family was born, or your children were born, or yeah, a smell, a flavor, yeah. And so we say chekpa or chekpapi. Chekpa is one, and chekpapi would be two. And now you know what they are. Chekpa means belly button or umbilical cord, but it also means twin or twins with an S. Chekpapi. So where is our chekpa? Where is our belly button? Well, it's kind of a wonderful coincidence. It's here at Minneapolis and St. Paul, the twin cities. It's where twin rivers join together. So this baseball team, when they moved here from Washington, didn't realize that they were coming to the Dakota center of the universe. And in 1858, when Minnesota became a state, this was the national flag we wanted. But the rest of the nation said, who do you think you are? We said, well, we're going to be state number 32. So we want to be that star in a star of 30 stars. Come on, we'll be the North Star, the center, and all you other stars circle around us. How do you think that went over with Ohio and some of the other states before us? Yeah. So speaking of 7-star people and Makoche, well, those are the 7 stars of the Dipper and the Little Dipper. And that big one spins around and points to that little one. And so now you can see how we're organized. 4 plus 2 plus 1. Those are the 7 of us. And since you know, the 7 of us are teepees too. So let me click these buttons. There you go. 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So you see, it's almost like we have a teepee way up there in the stars. And I realize that many of our elders really do believe that we're in a teepee down here and we'll go back up there to a star teepee. And that the fire in the teepee is like the hot rocks, which the stars are. But they also know that those stars are other suns, because our word for sun is we, and our word for star is wichankpi. So the word we or sun is in the word for star. So now you see why there's Makoche Ikikchupi means land return. So there's Bedote, where the 2 rivers join, and there's that cave, Wakantipi, or Indian Mounds Park in St. Paul. And so what you'll notice here is our Dakota people were the entire state of Minnesota Makoche, plus western Wisconsin and the 2 Dakotas, parts of Iowa, and probably up into Canada. But now we occupy only these 4 little places where the arrows point, which is 1% of 1%. or 0.01% of our original entire state and region. And 90% of us are no longer here in Minnesota. Only 10% made it back since 1862. And you'll see that the 4 red places are in the South now, the Dakota communities, and we're really not even supposed to be here. There's still a law on the books that says it's illegal for us to be here. And in 1863, there was a $25 reward or bounty for our heads, and it went up to a $200 bounty. And that's why my dad and his family, rather, not my dad, he wasn't born yet, but the grandparents, great-grandparents, went all the way as far as you could get, anyway, up into Saskatchewan. So this is the book of Dr. Wazia Tawin, not far from you. And this is a march that she organized and started in the year 2000. And every 2 years, we will walk the 150 miles that the women and mostly children had to walk. And this is the path of that walk down the Minnesota River at Makato and back up toward Fort Snelling to the concentration camp. It's November 6 to 13. It's a pretty cold time, and that's when we walk. It takes us the same number of days, and we stay in churches or community centers and so forth. So find where Lake Superior is, right? You see where Duluth is? And then you see the Twin Cities, about 160 miles south of there. So some of our people went south to Iowa. Some went, up your way and kept going. And you see that a lot of people, when I went up to Canada, my dad's family, most of them stopped at Standing Buffalo up there. His family took that, just a few, went way up to that far northwest corner there of the map, up into Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. And what I found out was the tuberculosis, and it killed probably at least half of them or more. And so if there were maybe 1,000 that went there, barely 400 or 500. And then to think about them leaving after a few years and coming back, I'm just in awe. I watched that show by the Harvard professor, Dr. Gates. And who do you think you are, and about the ancestors, right? And anyway, so here's Makoche Ikikchupi, and there's our website. I'll put this website in the chat, and I'll also put the website of the little video I gave you there, so you can see it later. This is what we're doing now. We're trying to come home and live in these lodges, which are made out of tamarack trees. And here's our land recovery, it's called Makoche Ikikchupi. The purpose of this organization is to reconnect Ocheti Shakoing, 7 starved people, to our homeland through land recovery in Minnesota Makoche and the establishment of culturally oriented and self-sufficient communities. We're not looking for any money. We just want to be allowed to do this, to recover and share traditional knowledge that connects us to our homeland, and it connects earth to sky. So to develop sustainable and regenerative practices that will help restore integrity to the land and water while living the ethic of Mitakuye Wasin. That means that we're all relatives. So we want to heal the water and the land as well, and to work toward land justice. So that's kind of our 4 goals. I'm on the governing council for this. And this is a little timeline. In 2009, we formed. And by 2015, we were getting donations, a lot of from different churches and settler people, colonial settler people who found out about our organization. It's a 501c3. And even, some churches, some pastors were letting their folks know. And so by 2019, we had enough donations to buy our first piece of land. It was 21 acres. And it's still considered in the city of Granite Falls. It's not reservation land. and it's within 2 miles of Granite Falls, but just barely. We named it Village of Wellness, or, healing village, Zani Otunwe. And unfortunately, we started 3 of our Earth Lodges, and that fall of 2019, we were ordered to stop. We got a cease and desist from the city. And so 4 or 5 of us were invited to meet with the city council and the mayor and 2 of their lawyers. So we prayed about it, and we had our highest law, which was our 2 pipes, the prayer pipe we have, right? The bowl and the stem. And we prayed and we said, this is our highest law. And it represents our spiritual principles and our ancestors and the way we've been taught to live in a good way as relatives. And they introduced us to their 2 lawyers. Well, after 5 hours, the 2 lawyers said, how can we help you? It was not adversarial. It was a long time of learning from each other, listening carefully. And they actually wrote the legislation. We realized we're going to need to change the law, because if we break the law as written, it's $10,000 a day, and I would be arrested. We would be, for building these structures, which seems pretty crazy because we're not asking for money. We're not going to build a casino. We just want to grow food and traditional foods like like my dad and his grandma got to have. So this last 2 months ago, last year and this year, we've been working with the legislature to try to change that. But honestly, it's going to take yet another session, I hope. I hope we even get an extra session. It's successfully passed in 3 of 4 committees. And Dr. Waz gave the presentation in one of the committees. I gave the presentation in 2 other committees that she couldn't be at, and I couldn't be at the first one. So they only give you 2 to 5 minutes. And we have our PowerPoint, and that's part of what I'll share with you here. I'm almost done with this piece. And then it passed unanimously. We had bipartisan support, Republican and Democrat, in both the House and the Senate. And remember, we got through 3 out of 4 committees. It was that 4th committee, it never got a hearing. And either, it's because this is a budget year, but we weren't asking for money. But, COVID 2 years in a row, their agenda is full. They don't really care. We're not high priority, right? But to us, our trees are going to be rotting. The thing about these tamarack trees is they're very water resistant, but you can't leave them on the ground. We bite the bark off. We've already been working hard. So we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. And it doesn't mean that we're stubborn and ignorant and trying to cause trouble. So that's why I'm so grateful that Pastor Kogeman was willing to let me share this with you, because, it's justice. And that's what Makoche Ikikchupi is. It's about land justice. So by 2025, we hope to have our 7 lodges built, one way or the other. And we also, this weekend, we built a geodesic dome, kind of like Buckminster Fuller, like Epcot, or the World's Fair. And that way we can grow our plants, extend the growing season. And so like that. So by 2050, maybe we'll have more places of land where Dakota people can come back home, the 90% who are in exile. So look at this one. That one's completed, not in Minnesota, but up in South Dakota, because they don't have the same law. Plus, this is on the reservation up there. Can you imagine a buffalo running across that? It looks like a mound, doesn't it? Remember what I said what the burial mounds look like? It's about the same. But if it's a pregnant Mother Earth belly, then look how we are in our mother. When you go back into the sweat lodge or into the mound, it's living close to our Earth Mother. We won't use electricity. We don't use copper, or we're not having, running water. We're going to be off grid. And that's probably healthier for us. We'll sleep better. When it's dark, you go to bed. We chop wood. We grow our own veggies and make healthy food. And so we're saying here on our pamphlet, my wife, Dr. Roxanne, and Waz, and 3 or 4 of us wrote all 200 legislators over and over and over again, each one in different committees as it came up. We also enlisted the help of our students and our fellow professors at the Twin Cities campus and Duluth. And we're saying, it's probably smart that all of us learn more to be off. Like my grandmother cooked on the wood stove. I remember bringing the wood in. It was so wonderful the way she would make bread, or, and we're asking to be decriminalized. Right now, we would be criminals for building these. So we asked, help. If I had done this presentation maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, we would be asking you to write letters to your local folks. It won't hurt. It might help, because you see who our authors are. Senator Lang and Eichhorn, and then Representative Keeler, she's Nakota, and Becker Finn is Ojibwe. So we have women, indigenous guides also. I mean, it was a beautiful opportunity. We were shaking hands a year ago, and we were still back at the Capitol even now, but we had to be, it's tricky. So I'll move a little faster on here. I've already discussed that. Here's one of the pieces of, I guess you might say, one of our arrows, an arrow we didn't want to use, but this is just from last November, 2020. All of Minnesota cities got together. So this would include Montevideo as well. And there's a section in here on racial equity in Minnesota. And it says, since the earliest days of its history, race and racial inequity issues have been present in Minnesota, with redlining and institutional racism and employment, housing, industry, railroads, all the nasty stuff that some people had to live next to. And so I'll move along on here, but basically it's saying that it mentions, George Floyd, and, Minnesota ranks at the bottom of all the states as far as some people have enough money and a lot of people don't. We have a big divide, and that divide is true in our education and so much. So how do we begin to bridge these gaps? And the world is looking at Minnesota now. So this would be a wonderful opportunity to say, maybe Minnesota cares about its BIPOC, it's BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So every city, has its own rules, but I just want to point out letter E. One of the things they're saying is actively look at your laws, review and amend your existing statutory language to identify any laws that contribute to the racial inequities and consider racial equity impacts when you're making these laws and policies. So the city of Granite Falls got the message even ahead of time. So you can see why we're glad to have them, and the mayor, we feel very good. We're very close with them. They want this to happen. They don't want to have to, the Minnesota building inspectors. So here are the 3 forms. We had teepees, we had bark lodges at planting time around this time of year, and then the earth lodge. We have not lived in earth lodges for at least 300 years since they were up at Badewakong, which the French called Milac. So this is an aerial view of our 21 acres on Minnesota Makoche. And that's the first one we're going to call Zani Otunwe, Healing Village. And you'll notice that when Fort Snelling came in around 1819, 1820, we were still living right here, Little Crow in what is St. Paul, and so forth, Chuck Bay. And by 1851, well, even 1837, Little Crow had to move from the east side. All the Indians, they said, you guys got to go west of the Mississippi. And as long as the water flows, we won't bother you. That was 1837. By 1851, there was still more, treaties and less land. And by 1862, 11 years later, the money hadn't come and people were starving. It was a very hard year. And so that's when the young men went to people like Little Crow and said, our grandmas they don't have anything to eat, and they said, are you a coward? And Little Crow said, no, I'm not a coward, but you need to know, I've been out east. I know how many there are. And I'm not afraid to die with you, but you will die. And so, it was August 17 of 1862. It was a very, I mean, the missionaries and some of the pastors and church people, they had been writing letters, even all the way out to President Lincoln and others, saying, this is so wrong. You promised these people for 11 years and they're living on less and less land. There's nothing to hunt or grow. They got diseases, they're starving. You got to do something, or something bad's going to happen. Well, here's what we learned. They actually set it up so that if we did go to war, they could say, see, you're not going to be civilized. And then they could break what little was left in those treaties, never pay anything, and expunge us, eradicate us. And that's what happened. So it was only about 3 weeks of conflict, but there were a lot of lives lost. Some say 400 or 500 European and and maybe about as many Dakotas. We're not sure. But Governor Ramsey said we must be exterminated or forever driven beyond the borders of the state. That's genocide or ethnic cleansing. That's the definition. And so, as you know, there were 303, but it was reduced to 38 plus 2 more. It was the largest mass hanging in not just US history, but in world history of simultaneous to gallows. And one of the songs that I sing at All Nations Indian Church was taught to me by the grandson of the man who wrote that song. It's the song that they sang as they held hands, the 38. It's a Christian, well, not really. I mean, it's a hymn. It could be. It's sung in Christian churches. It's called Many and Great. And it has 7 verses, but they're all in Dakota. And if it's all about our creation story, it's, oh man. So, yeah. So basically, we remember all of those that were lost. And, you know, we want to teach our children that, you know, and others that through education, once you know, you can't unknow. And it's the kind of work that Kogiman does. And so I won't go into this, but just to connect it to some scripture here, because I know your church group, you know, Jeremiah was alive at a very difficult time. He watched his nation of Israel and Judah getting smaller and smaller. And the enemies were all around him, for whether it be Assyria or Babylon or Egypt. And they all kind of came in. And so there was a cave, a grotto, an opening in what would be the north wall of Jerusalem, the temple. And 600 years later, that's the site of Jesus' crucifixion and the Golgotha site. So Lamentations is believed to have been written by Jeremiah, although it doesn't say his name in that. But I looked at the Lamentations, you know, it means crying, weeping, tears. And I thought about the cave at Wakantipi. And here's these burial mounds, right? There are mothers. And think about the women, you know, I mean, birth and death. It's a very difficult, sacred time, because sometimes you lose the baby or the mom or both. And so the birth of a nation, the birth of a culture that's been around for so long, thousands of years. And we'll come back to that. But you see the cave under our burial mounds on a bluff. I'm basically saying that the Twin Cities is our Jerusalem, our sacred place. It's our Garden of Genesis place. And there were 19 burial mounds and 18 burial mounds, and they're lined up, and they actually match with the stars. There's a buffalo and a snake. And so the drawings in the cave are buffalo and snake drawings. So what I'm saying is the cave ceiling is a planetarium. That's where the star drawings tell who we are, where we come from. And so people would come, even other tribes, and they would go study the cave ceiling. And this is from 1918, you know, about 100 years ago with the last flu. People would still go in and study. They'd go in a canoe and they'd light a torch, and they would read the symbol on there. Unfortunately, this is the inner cave. The outer cave had already been dynamited. So most of the story glyphs had been blown away. And that was by the railroad. And so can you see the snake drawing on that one that pops up there? You see? And just to connect you back to to perhaps Moses when he was leading his people out of Egypt. Remember, he had a staff, a pole with a snake on there. And when the people followed that, they were safe, and they had to have faith. What is it about this snake symbol? We're taught to be fearful, and yet at the same time, it's a symbol that's so powerful. Well, there were 4 snakes carved in our ceiling. So that's what I've been studying and measuring and understanding. How do these 4 snakes have a message for us? So this is a 27-acre place where for half of my life, we've been 30 plus years, it was a toxic waste site. It's our sacred birthplace. It'd be like the sacred, grotto of Jerusalem. And it became a cancer-causing place where the railroads and people would push their garbage off the cliff. And so I won't take time to explain. It has to do with the equinox and the solstices, and then how the sun and the moon will line up every 18.61 years. And I tested that out. And here's the cave, once upon a toxic sanctuary, decolonizing this indigenous sacred feminine site. So it turns out 14 miles away, there's a big snake mound. And the 4 snakes in the cave by the St. Paul guided me over to this mound in Afton. Afton is south of Stillwater, and they're lined up. And so you can kind of see how that works. And if you keep going, it goes through Madison, Wisconsin. It goes through Chicago. And what's down there in Ohio? Anybody know? There's a giant serpent mound in Ohio. We have a mound and they have a mound, and they're 630 miles apart. That's longer than Babylon is from Jerusalem. But they're all connected. And it has to do with measuring the moon, okay? So I'm almost done with this. There's the grotto where Jeremiah would weep. And I noticed that the Book of Lamentations has 22 letters, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, the Hebrew alphabet that the Greeks used, alpha, beta, gamma, right? And so every letter has its own line, 22 verses. And that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, another. Chapter 3 is really a triple. So it's 66. Chapter 4 and 5 are 22 again. If you add those up, 44, 66, and 44, you get that number, 154. And unless you're an astronomer, you might not notice the connection. Okay, so it looks like this. Let's turn it sideways. And now I'm going to take you to a place in Africa. 20,000 years ago. These are marks on a bone. It's only 4 inches long, but somebody, probably a woman, 20,000 years ago, put these marks in 3 columns on a bone. It's called the Ishango bone. It was found about 1960. And that Bible book reminded me, okay, here we're talking about rivers, the Minnesota River, the Mississippi, and the Nile. This is upriver at what is today not Zaire, but Congo. That's where the bone was found, where the red star is. Is the Nile important in the biblical stories? Oh, yeah. And in fact, the Holy Family, they had to be in exile as well. They had to hide because remember, the firstborn son was about to be killed. Well, there's a woman who studied this bone and several others, but I'm going to show you the numbers. It is brilliant. Those are not simple notches. I won't take more of your time, but I want you to realize it's a calendar and it's artful mathematics that tells a story. If you have 13 turtle shells, you've got a whole, well, I have to explain this. 13 times 28 is 364. This is only 12 times 28. A turtle shell has 13 parts. And there's 28 days in a month. if you add light and take light off. But there's another day or day and a half of a new moon. And so determining those holy days is what the priests and the calendar makers always did. Well, somebody 20,000 years ago was figuring this out, and they carved it on a bone. And I'm telling you that I believe the Book of Lamentations is an almost same version. Instead of 60, 48, and 60, or 60, 61, and 60, half a year, or 6 months. That's what's carved on the bones, 6 months. Can you imagine Jeremiah weeping for 6 months? I can. Everything he knew was lost. It was ashes. His people were taken in captivity. So when you look at these numbers, you see what a genius woman this was. Between the numbers 10 and 20, there are only 4 numbers that are prime. In other words, there are no factors. 19 is one of them. 1 times 19. There's nothing times nothing else that's going to get you 19. 1 and 17, 1 and 13, and 1 and 11. Between your 10 fingers and your 20 fingers and toes. And then look at the bottom one, right? That's 20 or 10 plus or minus 1. So she's counting fingers and toes, but doing it artfully. So when you fill this in, there's a pattern here. And again, okay, there's the Lamentations, the chapters, when you read that book of the Bible. And it's a memory, it's a memory piece. The rabbis knew, because the Hebrew letters are also numbers, and it's a beautiful way to remember when it's a full moon and when it's, going to be the new year. And it's, okay, so there's the Bible one, and here's the bone from Africa 20,000 years earlier. Do you see that? It might seem a little crazy, but I'm working on it, and I don't have the time tonight to show you. So there's a little video, and we'll go back to the bones of our Earth Lodge. I'm almost finished here. So when you build this Earth Lodge, I call it starchitecture. There's 4, and then there's 13. So what's 4 times 13? 52. Think about a deck of cards. If you have 4 suits of 13, right? And what's 52 times 7? 364. Plus your birthday. That's like New Year's Day. And what's a turtle shell? It has 13 pieces on it. If each of those 13 pieces were 28, like 28 days in a month, there's 364. So these are the basic principles that are female. And this is what Dr. Waziatouin's Earth Lodge looks like on the inside. There's it's all wood cooking. It's very warm in there. Even during the polar vortex, 60 below zero, it was 60 above, and the stove wasn't even cooking. So we can have drum songs and medicines and teach our children. And, we're going to teach them about rocket science, but also, our science, the way we've always done it. And so I thank you for your patience tonight. We have 3 of these started. We want to finish those 3 and build another 4. And hopefully we won't be arrested doing it. And so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Wow, thank you, Jim. Fantastic. Jim, I just wanted to mention kind of a sideline when you talk about many and great again.
Yeah.
Like we
Lacaparo, exactly.
Yes, that is just a few miles above us. Of course you do.
Exactly.
Because you've been there. I remember seeing you there. We were there for that canoe thing. And the mission there, the mission was created in 1835. And that is where the song comes from, Many and Great. I don't know if you have mentioned that in the past. And so that was done by Joseph Revel. And we have one of our local sites named after him.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
And so this he wrote the music based on Lakota melody in 1846, and then it came into English in 1930.
Wow.
was
Yeah,
put into English.
yeah, yeah. And it was the grandson or great grandson of the words, the one who put the words to it in Dakota and then in English, who taught me. And
Wow.
but lac qui parle is French for talking lake, which
Yes.
would be bidet, yeah, or the lake that talks or talking lake. And I bet it was talking Dakota.
So how can our congregation and our larger community uh, be in relationship with you in regard to the Makoche
Yeah, Makoche.
project?
Yeah, I put the website and also of the little video in there. Our website has a lot of stories and tells you more about our progress. It'll tell you about the legislation, and hopefully we'll have very good news. It did end up in the omnibus bill, but that means it's in the big soup. And those soup pots, they get thumbs up or thumbs down, and there's a lot of hands stirring the soup, and it's generally it's not the path we wanted, but it might still with prayer and your good work, and yeah. So please, I hope those will get you started.
And what is the possibility of visitors, of a guided tour if we got a group
Oh, yeah.
together?
Oh, very good. Yeah, we would down at Makoche, sure. We have folks come. We'd need to know ahead of time, because depends on what projects we're doing. Last year we put in fence posts and planted trees, and sometimes we'll be just there to explain the project to people, and other times it's a working gathering. But yeah, I'll be in touch with you. I'd love to host you to come down.
I had wondered if we could contribute labor to
Oh, wonderful.
the project.
Yeah, sure. There's always things. Yeah, and I see Glenn here too. Hand up.
Glenn?
If you don't mind, I have two comments that I think would be appropriate. Coincidentally, I'm just reading a book which is titled Secrets of the Lost Mode of Prayer.
Wow.
And the author is Greg Braden. And he talks a lot about the Navajo in the southwestern part of the U.S. and their prayer techniques, which go way back to ancient times. And he speaks very positively about their methods of prayer. And so I just thought you might be interested
Oh,
in it.
yeah.
This could
I
well
am excited to hear that.
This
Yeah.
could well have been the mode of prayer from many of the Indian tribes way back when, but apparently this goes back centuries or maybe even millennia. And the other thing is, you mentioned 1862. Yeah, this is kind of emotional, so if you see a few tears come down my eyes,
Sure. Oh,
but I'm a native of New Ulm,
yeah.
where a lot happened. And some years after 1862, probably about 5 or 6 years later, a priest came to New Ulm from the country of Austria for the purpose of setting up a Catholic parish there. And he was horrified by what had happened. And he did a lot of research. And in 1891, he wrote a book that's now been reprinted. And it speaks very favorably of the Native Americans and why they had good reason to rebel. And I'm just going to read one paragraph at the conclusion of his book.
Thank you.
He says, again, this is copyrighted 1891. It's the original book that's been reprinted. But he says, to make still stronger our assertion that bad faith, unjust dealing, and privations were the sole and only cause of these Indian troubles, we give a letter that was addressed to the Secretary of the Interior by Mr. F.C. Armstrong, an Indian inspector. The letter is dated Pine Ridge, April 7th, 1890. And then it's a couple of pages long, but if you have not seen either of these books, I'll be happy to mail copies to you.
Oh, wonderful. You know, you can just, through Herb, please just pass the information and I'll purchase it and study it. And you know what I hear there? That was 8 months before Wounded Knee in 1890. In other words,
And he
I
talks
know
about-
that
he
many
talks about it.
missionaries, right, they tried to stop these, you know, it could have, we could have been good relatives, and we were. And we were marrying each other, and I know it was, you know, yeah, it's sad history.
In fact,
I have,
here's a picture
there
of
he is,
Paul
right?
that in his book too here, and you know, it's
Wow.
very much, it's a very you know, it certainly sympathizes with the Native Americans. The title of the book is The Indians' Revenge or Days of Horror, Some Appalling Events in the History of the Sioux by Alexander Burkhold. And believe it or not, in New Ulm, they actually have a park in Alexander Burkhold's memory, commemorative.
Wow.
Yeah, what a, so it's a very honorable, respected source, this book, because he's revered to this day as the founder of the Catholic parish, and there's even a statue of Alexander Burkhold in there.
Well, I'm
And
very glad that you shared this because, as I said, you know, my my mom has German heritage, and you know, my Dakota dad, he could speak German. He learned to make Kartoffelsalat, you know, potato salad, and you know, some. I mean, we have some sounds. All I'm saying is, as a Kogeman knows from his peace and reconciliation work, is that you know, humans are we can be really amazing in a good way and really amazing in not good ways, and sometimes that's the same person, but sometimes, you know, we just hope that we can listen before we have to act. And desperation, and we're seeing that today, desperate times. um, you know, I live right now I'm down in the cities, not up in Duluth, and I'm about 5 miles equidistant between 38th and Chicago and Brooklyn Park. And I know people in both places. In fact, the paramedic woman, the firefighter who asked to take the pulse, I was with her 8 days after she witnessed that. And she was beginning some healing. The trauma was in her. And a medicine leaf woman, herbalist, and my wife and I, the four of us, went down by the river by Fort Snelling, Badote, we would say, right? It's the place of our genesis, but it's also the place of our genocide. It's a place where we know we come in a difficult way, as you said, with tears, but also with hope that there's healing, and that only the healing can only come if we admit what happens. And yeah, I mean, I was raised in the way to follow Jesus as well, and I know there are many who say they follow Jesus that I have a hard time trusting, but I do trust what he was saying. So hopefully, you know, and when we do our walk every 2 years, there are churches that help us. They make food for us and let us sleep. And yeah, I mean, it's a time of learning from each other. We also have with the hangings the day after Christmas in Makato, we still do a run, and you know, from Mankato up to the fort, and it's cold, and you know, there's also a horse, a march with horses that come from the west, and I think you know, Minnesota Makoche is learning about its painful history. Minnesota wasn't always Minnesota nice, and sometimes in our Minnesota nice we kind of pretend not to see and hear and speak. But I think the healing is going to happen if we do this the way you are tonight. That I thank you so much for deep listening and love, that we come together in a good way.
And thank you, Jim, and thank you, everyone. And I know there are questions. It's 20 after. Jim, I hope that we can arrange to have you come back again sometime. and
Sure.
be with us.
I would love to, and you've been wonderful. And I love that picture behind Blake there of our beautiful blue ball of life. And that was actually, this picture was taken, I think, around Christmas Eve in 1968 when the astronauts read Genesis. And you know, it was in the beginning, right? In Hebrew, it's like Bereshith, you know, in the beginning, and so a place where we can all live and hopefully live better as good relatives. So, Dokshta Akewa Chinkikte. We'll see you again.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you, everyone.